So on this video I want to talk about this tool for creating trees called the Grove. It's a Blender add-on that basically allows you to grow trees. If you look at it, go to the page, thegrove3d.com, you can kind of see what it's about. The idea is that it can grow trunks of trees, different types, using some settings that mimic the way trees grow, and I'm going to show you how that works a little bit in this video. But on top of that, I want to show how you can take the general idea of what the Grove is doing, and it's a feature of it called twigs, where all of this foliage is basically a pre-made instanced object. You can use that to make sort of the equivalent of low poly card trees. Depending on how you grow this trunk, you can make it fairly low poly, not super low poly game style, but with a little trimming and a little rework, you can make a low poly tree fairly quickly. And you can definitely use cards to make all this foliage and do a pretty good job of making a tree. So yeah, we're going to go through that, and let's get to it. Let me put this off. And if we take a look at Blender, the gist of the Grove, the way it works is, I'm going to do it two different ways. I want to show you. You can, one of the catches of it is that you want to add this Grove tree like this, and then what you get is like the beginning of a little twig. But then you'll see up here in the presets for it, and it adds this Grove collection, in this case an ash tree. And if you look at that, what it's looking for is these twigs that are going to be particles that are thrown up on the outside of the tree. And you can put those, you basically put those into the tree by linking them from objects that are in the scene here. So you got an end object, side object, upward objects, and dead branch. I don't have those in the scene yet, so the problem is going to be that if I add them to the scene now, because I've already created this twig, it may be problematic. I think there was a warning about it in the documentation. So the idea is that you want to have your twigs preloaded, and you can buy them from the Grove site. They come with like a lot of different twigs that are already made, or you can make your own. We're going to show you what their twigs look like, and then show you the idea of making cards from pictures that you'd get on the internet, or even renders of 3D models that you might make of twigs in your scene, and we'll do it using one of their twigs. That said, there is a warning when you go to buy the application or the add-on that says, these twigs that they use they're licensed to the Grove, so you can't resell them in tree packs, so you can only use them in your own art. So I don't know how that would work if you were making a tree, a low poly tree for a game or something like that, but games are art, so who knows, we'll see. So the idea here is we've got an ash tree. You can change your tree type. These are the trees that come with it, and you can it's pretty easy to modify any of these to become something else. So these kind of cover all the different types of trees that you could do. We'll set it to an oak tree. Notice nothing changes here yet. We'll just go ahead and grow a tree without let's turn on the light here, and let me add shading. You can see it's got a fairly complex shader for the branches and the bark. What we're going to do is we'll add a background so we can kind of make it easier to see the tree. So we'll add a texture, environment texture. I've got the add-on or node wrangler set up, so I can just Control T to add these texture highlights, and then I'll add this, and then I'll go to my 3D folder where I have all of my HDRI backgrounds. Let's see. Models. There's one I like to use. Let's do K-Pill, I think. Now we can turn on the background. Yeah. Is that it? No, that's not it. Kira maybe, sunrise. Yeah, that's it. All right, so from there, if we go back to our tree, let's turn on the background. And so you can see our twig here. And the way it works is based on having this oak setting and the scale and everything just sort of set to default. If you hit grow, you start to grow a tree. This is a 5-year cycle, so it's 5 years worth of growth based on this 5. You can grow it again, and you start to see that it takes the shape of this oak. There's no sprouts on it, so there's no twigs on it right now. And we can grow. I'm going to grow one for a while here. And the idea is that if you have leaves on this tree, and you can kind of already see it happening where it's breaking off branches or making dead branches. Yeah, it's doing that based on the rules of tree growth. So it's creating, even though there aren't any twigs and there's no leaves on this tree, it's assuming that there are down here in the settings for shade, and it gives the leaves a certain area. And those will block leaves below it, which makes the tree grow in patterns so that the leaves can find light. And the idea is that branches that are lower down on the tree are shaded more, so they will die sooner. There's other rules like hormones that happen at the tips of the branches that cause them on different trees to grow in a different way. I won't get into all the detail on that. You can use those rules as a way of, you can see, let me turn on statistics, that this is a 93,000 triangles tree trunk right now, which isn't too bad. One way you can lower that, if you wanted to make a low poly tree, is to change this resolution down at the bottom. And right now that's a 16, taking the circle of the trunk and splitting it into 16 loops or 16 polys that shoot up the tree along the branches as well. Those will reduce polys as the branches get smaller because you don't need as much detail, but you still got a lot of polys because of this tree if you look at it in wireframe, because of the 16 edge loops along it, and the same thing on these other branches. So what you can do is if you change that 16 to something like 4 for a low poly tree. Now again, this depends on what your use case is. 4 would be if you were looking at like a forest or something, an aerial shot where you don't need all those polys on the trunk, because you're going to be basically looking more at foliage from the top. Or if you're using, you might do 5 or 6 for a medium poly tree to be able to see it from down low. But I just want to show you the effect. Notice I changed this to 4. Nothing happened because we have to regrow the tree in order for that to take effect. So regrow will take the years that we've generated this tree up to that point and then regrow up to that point using the new rules that we apply to it. So you can see now we have this 4, and it's not a great poly split here, and you could fix that obviously pretty easily by adding some triangles to tell it how you want it to, the direction of the vertices, because right now it's just quad. So if you added a triangle point between here and here, you'd be fine. So like, yeah, now we have this 4 quad tree, and it's 93,000 triangles, so it didn't change much from where it was. Let's go back to 16 and see what the difference was. Yeah, it tells you right here 53,434 faces, and if we regrow, 54,484. So not that big of a difference. So it's doing a pretty good job of reducing at the ends anyway. The bigger way to affect that is to change the rules for dead branches and the way branches basically die out or fall off the tree, so that you don't end up having all of these details and more of the foliage is seen with just the main parts of the trunk. And that comes in this auto prune. The shade, I believe, or drop here, where you can say, tells you it's got a nice information on each one of these if you hold on it. So shaded roots drop shaded branches. Each year a tree will grow countless new twigs. These sensitive small branches explore new space and search for light. The tree will then invest its energy only where the bright twigs are, and will drop the many shaded ones. So the idea is if we increase this drop number, or what they're calling shaded shoots, it will, or decrease perhaps, I'm not sure which one. Let's just see what happens if I make this like 0.6 and then regrow the tree. You should see a difference in the, yeah, see there's a huge difference in terms of the count. So we went from 90,000 down to 33,000 branches. And the thing is a lot of these polys are actually still hidden. They're not really representative in the trunk itself. So if you go and you look inside of these shoots, yeah, you can see it sort of here. There's little tiny polys that are inside that represent growth shoots or dead branches that didn't happen, but they're still there because it inserts them, and they're all over the tree that way. So one way you can lower the poly count is to select some of these vertex groups, because they fall under the vertex groups like dead twig, upper twig, side twig, end twig, depending on which ones you want to remove, and it will give you the ability to delete those. So if we go to edit mode, deselect, and then do twig select, you can see where, if I pull this off, there's a whole bunch of vertices right there that are unnecessary because they're hidden in the branch, and you can remove those after the fact, and that'll help trim down the poly count a little bit too. In addition, if I'd made this quads, it'd probably drop pretty significantly now, because a lot of the 30,000 quads is actually in the 16 rings or the 16 edge loops, and you can reduce it further by just going and editing after the fact. So that's the general idea of how these trees grow. Let's show you how the twigs look when we add them. So let's make, we'll get rid of this grove. Just delete that. If we want to add some new twigs, and you can, again, we'll show you how to make your own twigs here in a sec. And they release, you can go and buy them fairly cheaply on the Grove, but like I said, those are copyrighted. But they do have a free twig you can go and download that'll show you the kind of how to go about making twigs. So if we append from our twig library, I just have to find where I put it. Blender, Grove twigs. Since we're doing an oak tree, we'll do this European oak, and we just can add that, go into the objects, and we've got an apical and a lateral twig. Let's just go ahead and append those, and then we'll add them down here in the scene, and you can see what a twig is. Basically, it's this end of a branch, and in this case it's got some nice oak leaves and some acorns, some buds, and there's a, see, this is the lateral twig, and this is, which is a side twig, and then this is the apical, which would be the tip of the branch twig. So if we have those now in the scene, we can, let's go ahead and put them in their own group so we can hide them. To collection, these twigs. and then we can just hide that. Now if we add a new grove and make it an oak tree, we'll add the end, which will be the apical. So you can see it went ahead and just stuck that twig, and it's a particle system is what it's doing. Then we'll do a side, which will be the lateral. So there's our beginning of our tree. Now when it grows, yeah, let me see if it kept the settings. Didn't. Good. Grow. Here's our young tree. And there's all kinds of neat little rules like bending of branches based on weight of things on them. So you can change the bend, you can change the, if you actually change like the thickness of the tree, the branch, let's see, yeah, just thicken. Where this is controlling the tip of the branch. If you change that, so if we just made this like 1 centimeter, not 1 meter, 0.01, where it was 7 centimeters before, it actually will change the entire length of the branch, make it stronger, and it'll bend less because it's thicker, which is kind of cool. So if we hit regrow based on this new, now our branches are a little bit more stout because they're thicker all the way along the end to the end, and they grow a little bit less down towards the ground and more up. So if we made them thinner, let's see, so let's make it like 0.5 millimeters. So that'll be thinner than it was before since it was 7. And then regrow that. You can see how the tree falls down to the ground under its own weight, which is kind of cool. We'll get into how you can modify these branches after the fact based on, even if you do grow them based on the default rules, but just know you can play around with these settings and get some cool effects. You can also make them grow towards things, so you can set up like light objects and make them grow in a specific direction. You can make them avoid objects, like I've placed objects over the tree and had it grow up around them, and you can see the leaves trying to grow out and around the object. If you put them between 2 buildings, it'll try to find its way towards the light that comes through both sides of the alley or whatever you want to do. And if you put them in a forest, because you can grow these things in clumps, they'll actually grow related to each other and try to fight for light that way, which is, it's a pretty awesome application. So let's change our thickness back to, yeah, we'll just go with the default, so it'd be 0.007 and regrow. There we go. And then just keep growing. You can see as it gets older and older, these branches along the bottom are going to get shaded and start to die off. So grow. And right now we're at 110,000 polys. And this is a 15-year-old tree. You can even animate this process. It gets a little bit, I'm not going to do it on this video, but because it creates a shape or tree shape for every version of the tree over its lifespan. But it's a pretty cool animated effect. So like once you get to something you like as a tree, you can also do other things like prune. So if we go and we prune this branch here because we don't like it, or maybe might have waited too late to prune it. I'm just trying to find the right angle to cut one. Let's do it right here. Actually, let me restart. We'll go to an earlier stage so we can prune it then. So grow. So now let's say we want to prune here. Take the prune tool and just slice across the branch. Don't want to cut that. I wish there was a way to rotate the tree while you're in prune mode, because you want to kind of get an angle on some of these branches. Yeah, we'll cut this one further out. So prune, maybe here, there. And then from that, hit escape, and then grow some more. And it'll keep those prunes and cause the tree to grow in a different way than it might have otherwise. So let's take, and we can prune some more. So like here, maybe this one. Yeah, let's get rid of one of these, like maybe it was a lightning strike or something up top. A little bit higher here. There we go. That's going to change the way, because now we've got this big old missing branch. The tree will grow to fill and take advantage of that space if you keep growing it from there. But still have the scars of the branches that you've pruned. So it's kind of cool. Really neat program just to even play around with. Okay, since I promised you, right now we're at 106,000 triangles. I'm going to show you how you can start to implement this using the way the tool works and much lower poly. Actually, while we're at it, let me just show you a quick render of how nice this thing looks. Turn on the cycles. How nice it looks just in the final result, because it the real-time render of the leaves and stuff really just doesn't do it justice for how nice the quality of the tree you're getting off this tool. All right, so let's go and look at it as a way of making a lower poly tree. Okay, so let me open something that I've already done. So we've covered the idea of taking these twigs. They can be 3D models, they can be cards, whatever, text, any kind of object you can imagine. And it's going to grow them based on their origin points off the branches at specific points, because they're meant to be the ends, the twigs that grow at the end of these tree branches. All right, so let's open, I misspelled that. All right, so what I've done is I took those oak branches, these guys, which were the original twigs. I broke them up to make a texture card. Let's hide this. So I just took the bits and pieces of the branch, went into an orthogonal camera view, like above. Let me go into my camera right here. Laid them out so that I could fairly easily just take like single plane objects and texture map them with these. And then also too, the reason I made this plane is so that I could also bake a UV map and get that extra layer of UVs in the texture as well. And I think I also did, I don't know if I ever kept it, but I did also do a, let's look at it, material. Yeah, normal and a rough, but I don't have them here. I've put them on this one. So if you look, this is the high poly 3D twig, and this is actually just a couple of cards that I've taken this rendered texture and created using like 36 polygons. Roughly the same thing minus the dimensional acorns, which you probably wouldn't notice that much on the ends of a tree. So if you look at the texture, the material, I've just got a normal map that I baked. Select the UV editor, this guy. And then the texture with this guy. And that's how I ended up making this simplistic twig. So for the oak, there's this apical, or this lateral twig, which is the one I just made, and then there's this tip twig, which is roughly the same thing, just minus the acorns, I believe. So you can make these low poly twigs, and once you get those made, you're going to have, what was this thing? Let's look at the stats. So yeah, it's like these two. Go into edit mode. You can see there's a lot of faces. $7,000 triangles just for these twigs, which you can imagine once you've replicated those across a trunk for an oak tree are going to be pretty high, versus this one doesn't have all the leaves on it yet, but this one does. So let's just look at it. You can see it's pretty low poly. It's like 36 triangles, so that's a significant reduction in the tree right there. So let's just look at that. Since I've replicated this higher poly model, we'll plant a grove, an oak tree, and see what it looks like with just those lateral twigs placed on it. So we'll add the grove. Here's our tree. You can take it and move it. So we're just going to grab these two and shift them over here so they're out of the way. Make it an oak tree. Why did it do that? Let's see. Shifted in position. I'm not sure why. Maybe because I moved it, but maybe we just move. If we just move this, does it move them both? Nope. Interesting. I'm not quite sure what the tree part of this tree does, but anyway, we'll make it an oak. Not sure if that affects the way it grows, but we'll find out. We'll make sure we can add our low poly twig, which I called, excuse me, oak twig plane and oak twig plane 01. So for the end, we'll do oak twig plane 01. And for the sides, we'll do the lats. So you can see the one isn't finished, but we'll leave it at that for now. You can also just use that lat again. So if you wanted to do for both, it might get a little repetitive, but you see how it could work. And we can change them now once we've grown it. So let's grow that. Yeah, it's a little repetitive, so we can change our twig here to this one, which will be different eventually when I add the extra leaves. It's kind of looks like a golf club right now. Actually, let's go ahead and we'll go for the repetitive one just to kind of do the total count, since it'll probably have a similar number of leaves. And let's keep growing it. So let's hide all of this. This. We'll add them to their own group or collection. Call it setup. Just turn it off so it doesn't show up. Then we can look at our counts. So yeah, 39,000 triangles for a 15-year-old oak tree, or 10-year-old oak tree. It's not too bad without having to go and delete, and I'm not doing anything to the trunk to minimize it yet, or the dead branch growth. so it's pretty good for the quality of the low poly twigs. Let's grow some more. Not bad. And then let's just see what it renders like. I don't have equirectangular image in here, but yeah, it's a little repetitive in the branches. You can kind of see that. Some of that is the using the same end, but you can also see there's an upward twig here. I'm not sure what the rules for that one are. And you could even put on some like dead twigs with that, which would have dead leaves if you wanted to make those. Yeah, so it may be, some of these may be represented by the upward twigs, some of these repetitions. So if you had a different twig for the upward twig, it may ease the repetitiveness of it. Let me make my light a daylight so we get better. It's too bright. So anyway, that's the gist of making it. Like I said, you can change the rules for the deadwood growth to lower the poly count on the branches and keep these leaves. So let's try looking at what that might be. So if we go to the drop and then the shade, we'll crank it up to what, 0.6. See what happens. Regrow. There's a lot of dead in that one. Let's regrow again. Regrow grows a different tree each time, so I may have cut it too much. Looks more like a dogwood. Let's try 0.5. There we go. It's a little better. It's 52,000 triangles versus the 100 and something or 90 something, I think, for 121 for this one. So yeah, that's the way you reduce. And again, like if we make it something like, maybe don't go so crazy. Let's do 4 and change our trunk to 4. And you can also reduce even more at the end, which might be, it's not going to make that big of a difference at this low resolution, but let's do regrow. Yeah, so 67,000 triangles. Again, some of those can still be reduced because they're just the stuff that's buried inside of the tree trunk or in the tree branches for the growth pattern. And the way you'd reduce those is go and select what you don't need after you've grown the tree the way you want, in order to get rid of those kind of junk triangles. I think you get left with like thickness, end and side twig. We don't have an upper twig here, so we could lose that. So the idea is if we go into edit mode, select, do it by faces, select. So we've selected 2,000 faces for the side twigs. That's all those. Let's see if I move those. Yeah, see the branches. So you can see which branches correspond to what by moving them out. So the way we can fix that, let's get those back. what you want to do when you're done and you want to actually turn this into, right now it's optimized for like having a lot of trees because all of these are particle based. If you go to the particle settings for the object, so select our tree, it's going to have these modifiers, apical twigs, lateral twigs, upward twigs, and dead twigs. So what you want to do is, you notice it's like a single oak tree with a bunch of modifiers, which are particles right now. If you hit convert, it's going to add all of those parts to your scene, and the triangle count just went up, I believe. No, did it? Yeah, no. Yeah, did I delete them? There. So 67,000 triangles for this tree. If we go convert, there we go. Yeah, so it does go up. Convert. We don't have any upwards twig, but we'll go ahead and convert those. Then select our oak here. Go into edit mode to the faces and birch groups. Select. There's all those. It's 759 faces. So we can delete that. Oops. Delete the faces. Select 2,138 faces. Delete. Upward twig. 159. Delete. And dead. 1,800. Delete. And that should just leave the thickness, which is the trunk itself. Yep, that's everything. So if we go back now, here's our trunk. Low poly, relatively. Could still be reduced more, obviously. Our leaves, which are all of these objects that are using, they're low poly, but they're still 134,000 triangles. So what you could do is we could get rid of each one of these now can be applied because they're not really doing anything, or even deleted because we converted the polygons to verts. Now these have, each one of these twigs has this viewport detail setting, which is just a decimate modifier on it. So you can basically take the quality of them down, but there's so many right now with all of those settings on it that we actually just want to, can't get my scroll, we actually just want to like combine them all to, let's just select everything and then minus the tree and the lights. I may have the camera in there somewhere. Let's see if we can join them. Oop. That's such a pain. Oh, here it is. Okay, let's do it this way. Yeah, that tree got selected. Still not quite sure what that's for. But so if we select all the twigs, join those. Now there's just this one decimate on them. And even though like it's 36 polys per leaf or twig system, right? We can still run this decimate on it to get it down a little bit lower and dramatically lower the poly count without changing the groups too much. So we've gotten it down to 80,000 triangles. Not too bad. I mean, probably just turned them all into squares and triangles, doing the best it can to hold the quality. Yeah, we might have lost some there. It looks like yeah, we lost a couple of leaves. So 91,000 is what we could get it to. We could go and prune more. We could make, instead of using these multi-angle leaves the way I've done, which isn't super efficient, we could just make like a 4-quad kind of curved blanket, put some leaves on that and let it distribute those instead, like an actual branch or something, without all of the angularity. That might end up looking a little bit repetitive too, but you get the general idea. To be honest, it's going to be really hard to get an oak tree with actual leaves on it to be much smaller than 60,000 tries probably. How many is the trunk? 33,000 faces, 62,000. So yeah, 60,000 of it's the trunk. So you could do some further reduction there. One way you could really help it along is like just taking these trunks and make them into cards themselves, or these branches, these dead branches could end up becoming like a single card or a couple poly card instead of all the polys that are involved. That would significantly lower the polygon count for that a lot. So anyway, that's the Grove and how you can start to do some lowish poly trees. Let me just show you a couple of the others that I did. So did this one, which was manually placed these cards based on a botanic tree, I think, using the branch, and then I've got this card for the repeated kind of mess of branches inside, since it's so thick. That helps lower it a lot. Ends up looking kind of like an artichoke. I'm going to play around with making that using this Grove tree method, but this one actually was one that was grown from the Grove and using pretty much the same card, slightly different shape for these twigs. And I got that down to this pine tree. It's, make sure I'm telling you the truth, 14,000 triangles for the tree and some of the cards. If we turn this off, you're looking at 13,000 triangles for this tree, which isn't too bad for a pine tree. Could have probably gotten lower. Oh, I do have the decimate. I don't know if I have it turned on. Yeah, I got it on there a little bit. So you can go down to something like that, which I took the decimate modifier down to like 0.6 and it took it down to 9,000 triangles. So, and obviously I was a little bit, I reduced the deadwood that you would see on a tree like this a lot in order to get the polygon count down, but the results can be pretty good for something like that you might put in a forest. I didn't go in and show you the bend modifier. There's a draw where you can actually draw and extend branches. You can plant these trees in forest, and like I said, and make them grow with each other. There's some really nice features in this tool. I suggest you check it out and play with it. Check out the license and see if it works for what you want to do. Obviously, it's not for making resellable assets, which are going to compete with the programmer, but it could be useful for large jungle forest, whatever type works that you're working on. So anyway, that's the tutorial. Hopefully you found it useful. And if you have any questions, just post them in the comments.